Good morning and welcome to Cross Current Church Online. Thank you so much for choosing to spend some time with us this morning. Let's get comfortable and check out the announcements for this upcoming week.
Hey mamas, how are you guys doing? How is it going being parked at home? I certainly pray that you and your kiddos are well. What challenging days these are in so many different ways.
Image Youth Group is live online Wednesday evening between 6 and 8. If you're middle school or high school age, Chris and I would love to see you there. Email image@crosscurrent.org for the invite code.
When the night has come and the land is dark and the moon is the only light we see, no, I won't be afraid. No, I won't be afraid. Just as long as you stand by me.
We'd encourage you to check out our Facebook page for any announcements or upcoming events. You can also follow us on Instagram. We are live streaming the message each week, which is uploaded to YouTube that you can share with your friends and watch from anywhere at any time. You can give of your tithes and offerings at crosscurrent.org. If you click on the More tab, there you will see the giving option. You can also text an amount to 703 972 1748.
Well, good morning, friends. My name is Chris Girardi. For anybody new that's joining us online, welcome. I'm live from my garage currently, and it feels good in here, actually. But I miss being with you guys desperately. I know some of the introverts are kind of like, what's the big deal? It's been kind of nice having this break at home, but the extrovert in me is dying a little bit every day. It just kind of feels like the stages of grief, yet I'm stuck in that first stage of denial. I don't know what your routine has been over these last few weeks that we've been stuck at home, but literally every day when I wake up, one of the first things I do is I get on my news app and I scroll, hoping for some kind of good news, hoping for some glimmer that we're turning a corner and this nightmare is going to be over soon. But we're still here, and I think that's where most everybody is at. Those who believe and those who don't believe are desperately searching for good news wherever they can find it. Looking on Facebook and Instagram and the news and just conversations and Zoom calls that I've had with folks over these past few weeks, everybody, like me, is desperate for some good news, something different. But we find ourselves in this place where we're seeking good news, and even John Krasinski, hard last name to say, but the actor who played Jim in one of my all-time favorite shows, The Office, got in on the action, and he put together a YouTube show called, wait for it, Some Good News, and literally set up shop at his house. And he kind of the same sentiment was just like, I feel like we need some good news to share. It can't all be horrible. It can't all be bad. And so he put together a series of clips of just good things that are happening around the world, right? And why don't you guys check out part of it?
And in Alabama, for 81-year-old John Klein and his sweet Anne, marriage may be old hat, but it is still more romantic than any other out there. Anne, who's in a nursing home for Alzheimer's, is no longer allowed to have visitors. Well, that's not going to stop John from finding a way to sing to his bride.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see.
Great.
That last
Here we have a real-life notebook love story. A husband and wife who've been married for years, the wife struggling with Alzheimer's and stuck in a nursing home. And because of the quarantine separation issues brought on by this virus that we're all struggling with, they can only interact on opposite sides of the wall. And what do they decide to sing to each other? But this, amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. This is the good news. This is the gospel, which literally, when translated, means good news. As we approach Easter and Sunday, and as we find ourselves in these uncharted waters, I thought it only right to re-examine what the good news is. What is the gospel, and why does it change everything? Paul put it this way in Romans 1:16, "For I am not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of salvation for those who believe." The gospel on one hand is so simple that you can illustrate it in a song lyric or a single Bible verse like John 3:16, yet it literally has changed the complete course of human history. And it's just as relevant now as it ever was. So today, we're going to look at the gospel as a story in 4 acts. This is going to be a review for our Image friends. What up, Image? You guys are the best. Because this has basically been our theme for this semester. Act 1 is the way it ought to be, or relationship right. Act 2, the way it is, or relationship ruined. Act 3, the way it could be, or relationship rescued. And Act 4, the way it will be, relationship restored. We are going to focus mostly on the first 2 acts of the story and the conclusion to the story next week. The warning, there will be some spoilers ahead. First, we have Act 1, relationship right, or the way it ought to be. You know, no story starts on a bad note, right? Most stories start with everything going pretty well. You know, you think about Elsa and Anna at Coronation Day. They're excited to open up those gates and let everybody come in, right? We all get these glimpses into what things should be like, right? Like enough to know that the way it is right now isn't the way it was meant to be. We get these glimpses. I mean, think about the perfect, freshly made Chick-fil-A sandwich. You know what I'm saying? That specially crafted package that the Chick-fil-A scientists designed to keep it perfectly warm and crisp. Oh my gosh. But we get these glimpses of what life was meant to be like. It's kind of like that idea of shalom that I mentioned a few weeks ago, where everything was whole, everything was in its right place, everything was peaceful, and our relationship with God was complete. We were able to talk with him face to face. It says in 1 Corinthians 13:12, "For now we see only a reflection, as in a mirror. Then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known." And again, that's just this idea that we see glimpses enough to know that there's more than what this world offers us right now. That we know that something's missing. We know that it should be better than this. We know that we shouldn't be in a place where the whole world shuts down because of a virus that we can't do anything about, seemingly. We know it's not meant to be that way. And I love C.S. Lewis. He's one of my favorite authors. He wrote the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe series. He's written a bunch of great theology books, like Mere Christianity being one of them. And he also wrote a lesser-known science fiction trilogy. If you've read it, props to you. I'm not a huge science fiction kind of guy, but I love him enough to check it out. And it's one of, I think, he gives one of the best descriptions for what life would have looked like without the fall, without sin entering the world. Basically, the premise of the book is the main character, this guy, Dr. Ransom, he ends up doing some space travel, right? And there are all these other planets, and each one he ends up on, what he discovers is that there's life on these planets, but that none of these other planets have experienced the fall like Earth has. None of them have experienced the brokenness that sin brings into the world. And so we get these snapshots through C.S. Lewis's description of of his main character, Dr. Ransom, of what life could have looked like if sin hadn't happened. And so I'm going to read a quote from book Paralandria. And basically, he lands on this planet and he's starving and he's looking for food. And he finds this piece of fruit. And just imagine it was like this amazing mango, right? And he picks it up and he eats it and he's blown away by how good it is. It's hands down the best thing he's ever eaten. And this is how he describes that experience. As he let the empty gourd fall from his hand and was about to pluck a second one, it came into his head that he was now neither hungry nor thirsty. And yet to repeat a pleasure so intense and almost so spiritual seemed an obvious thing to do. His reason, or what we commonly take to be reason in our own world, was all in favor of tasting the miracle again. The childlike innocence of fruit, the labors he had undergone, the uncertainty of the future, all seemed to commend the action. Yet something seemed opposed to this reason. It is difficult to suppose that this opposition came from desire, for what desire would turn away so much deliciousness? But for whatever cause, it appeared to him better not to taste again. Perhaps the experience had been so complete that repetition would be vulgarity, like asking to hear the same symphony twice in a day. I love how he puts that. You know, it's this idea that when everything was right and we were truly experiencing God's shalom and all of its glory, that every little thing God gave us, we could appreciate it for what it was. That we could appreciate something for just being good and enjoy it in that moment without the fear of, hey, I might not get to taste this again, or what if I never taste anything as good, or what if somebody else steals it all and I don't get a chance to get any of it? You know, it's just this awesome picture of just being able to trust God and enjoy him in the way that he provides, and love that. Act 2, the way it is. Right now, relationship ruined. So this is where we find ourselves now, a world that's broken and literally sick. For many of us, it happens like this, you know, that we're living in this place where everything seems right and everything seems good, and we can't imagine it being any better, right? We're in that right place. But in what feels like an instant or a moment, everything completely changes and goes downhill. Kind of like this guy with the free taco.
Why'd you pay for that taco?
Hey, yo, you know this, boy. He's got his free taco.
All right, so don't ask me how many times I watched that video, because it's embarrassing. But seriously, friends, for us to have any idea or grasp at all of how powerful this gospel is, how powerful this good news is, we first have to face how broken our world is, how broken we are. Brokenness as a result of 3 categories. First, the choices we make, the things we do, the things we've done. We sin, we all fall short. We all fall short of the glory of God. We don't do the things we know we should do. As Paul says in Romans 15, this is a guy, by the way, that wrote most of the New Testament. He says, I do not understand what I do. For what I want to do, I do not do it. But I do the thing that I hate to do. In other words, Paul is saying, even when I try to do good, and I actually want to do good, I still struggle to do it. Again, because we live in a broken world where things aren't the way they should be. It shouldn't be that hard, but it is. Secondly, the choices of others. Things they've done to us. Ways that they've abused us, or lied to us, or manipulated us. We all find ourselves in one way or another struggling with the consequences of others. Things that we didn't even do, but we're having to deal with on a day-to-day basis. And lastly, we struggle through the brokenness of the world itself. The fact that there are natural disasters everywhere we look. The fact that we're struggling with this global pandemic that we have no idea what to do and we don't know how long it's going to last. The fact that in some places, kids are born in areas where they can't even get clean drinking water. See, Jesus himself dealt with this tension. Not that he was broken or that he sinned, but he constantly interacted with people that did, who were struggling through it. And one of my favorite accounts of this is Jesus and his friend Lazarus that we find in John chapter 11. And I'm going to read you this account. And this is one of Jesus' closest friends, Lazarus. And it says, "Now a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. This Mary, whose brother Lazarus now lay sick, was the same one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. So the sister sent word to Jesus, 'Lord, the one you love is sick.' And when he heard this, Jesus said, 'This sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it.' Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days. And then he said to his disciples, 'Let us go back to Judea.'" I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. So Jesus shows up to where Lazarus was. And it says, on his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in the loss of their brother. And when Martha had heard Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. "Lord," Martha said to Jesus, "if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now, God will give you whatever you ask." Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha answered, "I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day." But Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this?" "Yes, Lord," she replied. "I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who was to come into the world." After she had said this, she went back and called her sister Mary aside. "The teacher is here," she said, "and is asking for you." When Mary heard this, she got up quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet entered the village, but was still at the place where Mary had met him. When the Jews who had gone to be with Mary in the house, comforting her, noticed how quickly she got up and went out, they followed her, supposing she was going to the tomb to mourn there. When Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. "Where have you laid him?" he asked. "Come and see, Lord," they replied. Jesus wept. Then the Jews said, "See how he loved him?" But some of them said, "Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying?" Jesus, once more deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. "Take away the stone," he said. "But Lord," said Martha, the sister of the dead man, "by this time there is a bad odor, for he had been there for 4 days." Then Jesus said, "Did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone. Then Jesus looked up and said, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I know that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me." When he said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The dead man came out, his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. Jesus said to them, "Take off his grave clothes and let him go." I love this story for a number of reasons. The way that you can see how close Jesus has gotten with his friends, Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. And that even Jesus, who was all-powerful, and we know that at the end of the story, he raises Lazarus from the dead. He knew he had power to do that. But still in the moment, as he sees his friends grieving, he also is deeply moved, the scripture says, and his touch to the point of weeping himself. And I think what grieved Jesus so much wasn't so much that his friend had died, because again, he says several times in this passage to his disciples before he even goes to visit, and he says to Mary and Martha, this isn't going to end in death. So I don't think it's that he's grieving because his friend had died, but I think what Jesus is really grieving here is the fact that, again, he looks at his friends and sees the way that they're struggling and they're grieving through this. And he fully knows that this is not the way it was supposed to be. I mentioned earlier that we have a hard time really grasping that, what life was really meant to be before the fall, before sin entered the world, before everything got messed up and broken. But Jesus did know what that was like. You see, Jesus left heaven where everything was perfect and great with the Father and came down to earth and took on flesh to be with us. And so he knew exactly what things were supposed to be like, and that we weren't supposed to watch our friends die and bury our brother. We weren't supposed to struggle in that way, and Jesus knew it. And he hated to see his friends struggling, knowing that it could be different, knowing that it didn't have to be that way. To me, one of the things that makes the gospel story so compelling is that when we look at the accounts of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, we know these were real people, real historical figures. And what they write down here is their eyewitness account of what they saw, what they experienced themselves, of how Jesus changed people's lives, how Jesus changed their lives. And what's so great about that is we still have that gift today. In Revelations 12:11, it says this: "They triumphed over him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. And they did not love their lives so much as to shrink from death." And on that note, I thought it would be awesome to end our time this morning by hearing an actual story, real life example of the gospel at work and some members from our church. And I know we're all stuck at home. And so the only thing we have in order to be able to see each other is a Zoom call. And I wish, like many of you, that I would have gotten stock in Zoom a year ago, but that's all right. So without further ado, here are my friends Johnny and Jenny Comartin sharing some of their story. Yeah. First of all, thanks so much for doing this. And I've known you guys for years. I don't know, 50 years maybe?
15, maybe 20.
I know.
Combined. So some of you guys at Cross Current may know this, but I used to work for Young Life. Johnny and Jenny both used to work for Young Life too. That's kind of how we initially met. Mm-hmm. And it's because of these two that Rachel and I got invited to Cross Current for the first time. And I know there's a bunch of other folks that would say the same. You guys just have a gift for inviting people. And so part of this message, we're talking about just the gospel story in our lives and our testimony. And knowing you guys, I know that you guys have a pretty good story, and you guys went through a season where you had a particular struggle in regards to John's health. And I'd love to just hear a little bit more about that from you guys.
Yeah, when we first met, it took John a couple of weeks to finally tell me that he had epilepsy. He was like really nervous to tell me. He thought it would be like a deal breaker. But I had already known, like other people had already told me. And it really didn't affect who John was, like who his heart was, like his larger than life personality, the way he loved and served and cared for others. And those were all the parts I fell in love with. So the epilepsy was just a little tiny bump in the road. It didn't really hinder us at all.
Mm-mm. Okay, so you guys were living in Alexandria for a while. You found out, okay, John had epilepsy, and then fast forward, then you guys moved to Bolivia. And what did you do there, and what was that season of life like?
We were teachers down in Bolivia. Okay. I was a teacher prior to going on Young Life staff. We taught there. We made a commitment for 2 years, and we did great. The teaching experience was wonderful. Mm-hmm. We loved it. But it was a time where we saw, for the first time, declining health.
Yeah, I would say like we went down for a big adventure. Like John and I loved that, and we were off and set, and we felt like nothing could stop us. And so we took off on a big adventure to South America. But while we were down there, I guess we realized living in a third world country, we weren't getting the quality of healthcare that John really needed for his epilepsy. And so we saw him go from seizures, maybe 1 or 2 a month to 1 or 2 a week, and they were lasting a long time. And it really prompted us, like we kind of thought maybe we'd continue to travel and continue big adventures. And John started training for another Ironman while we were in Bolivia, and then we realized, oh, you kind of can't, like that wouldn't be safe for you to be off on your own and have a seizure and us not be able to find you. So it really started to impact our daily life. I had to really like keep an eye on him and wonder where he was. He couldn't just go off on his own at all.
So tell me a little bit, so when he would have one of these seizures, what did it look like?
Yeah. So for a lot of people, they wouldn't even know he was having one. It's he always describes it as a light switch in his head. It just kind of goes off for a second. Yeah. And where his seizures originate, they affect his memory and his speech, his language function. So he can't talk. Or if he does talk, he talks in like gibberish, and you're like, kind of weird. They didn't last very long. But
prior to being down there.
Yeah, and usually he could just kind of pick up where he left off. Like even if you were driving in the car, he might miss his exit, but like where driving comes from in your brain, you can go on autopilot and just keep going. So they really were just like little blips in our life.
Okay, so then you moved from Bolivia back to the States in the glorious county of Loudoun.
Yeah.
And then everything was like the best ever, right? In Loudoun?
We had a really rough first few years here in Loudoun. Through my head, through my stress, and a bunch of life stressors. We had some children.
They're stressful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it turned out we thought the medication just wasn't working real well in Bolivia, but also I was put on some medication and went and saw a bunch of doctors here. And for the first, I'd say 2-3 years in Loudoun, it was really tough. For the first time, it really was a big, I'd say, struggle in my life. I look back at it now and I don't remember a thing about it, but I feel like I was just in a fog or a negative.
Even identity and like who he was and who he was supposed to be, I felt like was being stripped from him during that time.
Big thing was that my license was taken away. I wasn't able to drive for about 1.5 years, and that was 2 years. And that was very hard. Like you say, just depending on other people. Thank God I was able to depend on other people, and so many people came around me. It was just wonderful. But yeah, it was so much that.
But that was hard. Like it's hard to ask for help, especially like in our culture, right? We're supposed to be like self-sufficient and do everything on our own, and we were in this place where we had to rely on other people, and it was really humbling and hard.
So then walk us through. So you're in Loudoun, and it's just things are really hard because of the medication's not working and the side effects of it. And I know you tried several different medications, and it just seems like the seizures are getting worse and worse.
Right.
So then what comes next?
Well, thankfully we were able to switch hospitals. We're going to one hospital and they said there's nothing that can be done. We'll just continue to unfortunately get worse and we can do nothing for you. But thankfully we went for it again. We went up to Johns Hopkins, and again, they weren't sure if it was going to be able to happen. They weren't sure, went through a bunch of tests, and at first they were saying there's nothing they can do about it. But thank God, it's pretty crazy. I think it was on a Thursday or Friday, we were told there was nothing they could do for us. And we had a rough weekend where we just had to, I guess, just face it, that
life for you would probably continue to decline. Like the seizures would continue to impact memory and language function, verbal memory. And so when faced with that, they say your only other choice you know, we can keep doing medications, but you're going to keep getting used to them and then they're not going to be effective. We have to look into surgery. And that's where Cross Current really got involved in that season of life, because we had to go and be away for a couple of weeks. They had to map John's brain, try to see if they could locate it, and then see if surgery was even a possibility. And
so we were told that it wasn't going to be a possibility. And we sent out info to prayer warriors, and people were praying. And about 4 days later, what was it? Maybe something like a couple of days later, a doctor came in and she said, there were about 5 or 6 doctors who said nothing to be done, but she said, you know what? I want to try this. It was a surgery that had never been done before. And she said, we are going to go for it. So it was a little scary being the first person ever being done on. But she said, I think we can do this.
Something that John had said, he said, you know, I don't know what this is going to look like. Like, we don't even know if he's going to be able to go back to teaching when this is all done. He said, but I feel almost called to this, and that no matter what, whatever life is like on the other side, we're going to live our life to glorify the Lord no matter what. And so just watching him and, you know, dealing and handling fear and his reliance to trust God, that God is going to be with us, knowing that, hey, God is not guaranteed that life is going to be perfect just because we follow him. It's still going to be hard, and there's no guarantees, but we're going to choose to go forward on this path with God.
Can you tell us, I know that there's like a really special story about, you know, right before you went under the knife for the surgery and then coming out on the other side, that the Lord met you in a pretty special way. Can you tell us about that?
So I'm going into my last surgery, the big one. I just wanted to make sure I was praying the whole time, just asking the Lord to be with me, and kind of knowing that everyone else was with me as well. And in the operating room, I was just praying, and up in the corner, pretty much right in front of my face, there was an army of angels. There was just angels with like blank faces and no feet, and it was pretty awesome. There's about 20 of them across, and I don't know how many thousands behind them. And then there was a little thing in front of them, and I knew it was the Lord. The Lord was there. He was with me, and with his army of angels behind him.
Yeah, I think I have a video of when we went in to see him after, and he was weeping, even, you know, and he just kept repeating, army of angels, army of angels.
I knew they were with me. I knew they were with me. It was pretty awesome. Pretty wonderful.
Just that idea of, we just kept saying, Lord, like, thank you for not letting us go through this alone.
Yeah.
Not only do we know that you're with us, but then that he has provided this people that are praying for us, and even
provide the doctors, and then yes, the angels were there. He said, boom, I'm here.
I mean, so part of this story is you guys both had to make peace with what if good didn't come from that? If you know, if you weren't able to teach again, and you know, if there hadn't been the surgery, you guys kind of had to make peace with, okay, this could be our life. But praise God, that's not how the story went. And you got this one-time surgery that's never ever been done, and this awesome miraculous thing happened, and
it really was miraculous. Yeah.
And now you, not only John are you teaching, but now Jenny's teaching too. Both teaching.
Yeah.
So we're kind of like 2 years removed from that season. What has, kind of tell us a little bit about what does life look like since then, and you know, what has kind of going through that season taught you about just your appreciation for the Lord, and I guess just kind of living life on the other side of it.
Well, very thankful. You know, we aren't promised that everything's going to go well. We weren't promised that everything's going to be going great. And health's doing really well. They said it was possible that I would lose 50% or more of memory. And there's definitely some deficiencies, definite. But I feel like we were prepared for a lot more if that was going to happen. Prepared a lot more. I thank God with that. I'm able to teach, able to coach the things I love doing, the things I feel like I'm gifted at and can offer, I'm able to do.
Things that are different, definitely how we handle fear is different. I feel like we have learned to not let it control us and worry. I mean, in all honesty, like John's condition can come back, right? This isn't a forever thing. And so we have to really take those thoughts captive and under those to the Lord and know that he will prepare us if that is the case, or if anything else comes up right in our family, that God's going to walk with us through that too, and just trust in that. I think we've learned a lot about what it's like to carry each other's burdens as a community, and to allow people into that. I think we struggled with that, like not like, oh, I don't want to bother anybody. Like everyone has their own stuff to worry about, and but just the power of allowing people to walk through that with us.
Felt so supportive.
And just seeing like how this is how the church was meant to live together through this, and then enabling us to kind of walk into situations where people are going through hard times now and kind of enter into that and be present.
Yeah, I feel like a couple of things I hear you guys saying that I think is so great is that, the Lord says, one of the last things he says before he leaves is, in this world you will have trouble, but I have overcome. And I just think you guys are saying, like, okay, just because we follow Jesus doesn't mean we're not going to have these really hard seasons.
No way.
But being able to go through it with him and with a body of believers, like, as your support, it just makes all the difference. Right?
Yeah.
Amen. Well, thanks again, guys, for sharing your story. Love you guys.
Yeah.
John, you owe me a couple rides, different places.
Yeah, right. So I owe a lot of people a lot of rides. A lot of people gas money from those 2 years.
All right, hey guys, enjoy your Corona vacation.
Yeah, you too.
Woo! That is the gospel. That Jesus is with us in the storms. He rescues us from a mess we could never clean up. A surgery that had never been done before. Friends, Jesus is our master surgeon. We are in a mess that we can do absolutely nothing about other than allow him to rescue us from it. As I said, there will be some spoilers. Jesus does have a rescue plan for us in Act 3, and it involves him dying on a cross in our place. And although many of us are stuck in Act 2 the way it is, and maybe feeling like there's no hope, we can look ahead to Act 4 the way it will be, knowing that he will redeem and restore this mess. So friends, please join us next week for Easter. There's a word that keeps getting thrown around an awful lot, unprecedented, because really so much of what's happened in the last few weeks is unprecedented. It hasn't happened before. And so it's hard for us to even fathom kind of what's going on and even to know how to think or feel about it. But one of those things that's unprecedented is I don't think in modern history we've ever had an Easter Sunday where churches and congregations couldn't gather together to celebrate and worship the risen Christ. But we know the church is not bound by a building, and certainly neither is Jesus. So friends, please join us next Sunday as we celebrate and we get to hear the conclusion to this awesome story of how Jesus rescues us and redeems us. Amen. Let me pray. Lord Jesus, thank you that you're still in the process of writing our stories, that you're not done with us yet, that no matter how far into this broken world we find ourselves in this mess we find ourselves in, some of us feel like we're in a place and we just don't see a way out, either from financial burdens or sickness or things we've done or decisions other people have made, God, and we just don't know what the heck to do about it. but we trust you, that you are a God who rescues, and that Jesus, you did defeat death on the cross, and you offer us new life in you, God. And so we rejoice in you today, but we also anxiously wait to celebrate you next week on Easter. And we look forward to the day when you make all things right again, and we get to live with you forever and ever in eternity. We thank you again today, Jesus. We love you, Lord. Amen.
You give life, you are love, you bring light to the darkness, you give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. You give life, you are love, you bring light to the darkness, you give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. Great are you, Lord. It's your